My dearest listeners, thank you so much for the support you've shown me so far by liking and commenting on my stories, and most especially subscribing. You all have my whole heart, and your support means so much to me. If this is your first time listening to any of my stories, I'm so happy to have you here, and I promise you, it'd be worth it. Now, let me brief you on today's story. Imagine witnessing the gruesome murder of an entire family, and in desperation, you hide in a laundry cart to escape the perpetrators. However, you find yourself inside a hotel room with a handsome stranger standing stark naked before you. Fearing for your life, you plead with the stranger to protect you from the killers. He agrees, but only on one condition. Will you accept his condition? Besties, listen to the story of Emilia.
Emilia's POV. I locked up the bookstore with my hands slightly shaking from the cold night. I double-checked the door to make sure it was properly shut. It was a habit I had developed over the years ever since I had been attacked by a group of rogue wolves and other wolves as a teenager. As an Omega wolf, I was at the bottom of the pack hierarchy. I was weak and bullied by almost every superior wolf in the city, but I'd learned how to adapt. I kept to myself, avoiding unnecessary attention. I walked down the quiet street. I was lost in thoughts thinking about my parents, who had died while protecting me. The city was always peaceful at this time of the night. As I turned to a corner, I heard the sound of people begging for mercy. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized the desperation in their voice. It was the exact way I begged when bullied by other wolves. I wanted to ignore it, to keep walking and pretend like nothing ever happened. But my feet had a mind of their own, and I slowly slipped into the shadows, watching as a full family was surrounded by rogue wolves. Please, I promise to pay soon. You can have and hurt me, just spare my wife and kids, please. The man begged on his knees as he cried. My heart broke as I saw the two kids holding their mother super tight. Fear was evident in their eyes. You think I came here to play? Where's my money? The wolf, who seemed to be the leader of the pack, demanded. We just need a little more time, please, his wife begged. Spare our children. The leader let out a maniac laugh. So funny. Kill them all, he commanded. I gasped at what was happening. Was he going to kill the children too? I'm sorry, darling. I couldn't be a good husband and a father, the man said, regretting he had brought the whole family into this mess. It's fine, dear. We will meet in the afterlife where we can be together in peace. I love you, he said. I love you, his wife replied. We love you too, the children said together as they faced their judgment with their parents boldly. Perfect. Get rid of them, the leader said, and within 30 seconds, the full family lay dead in a pool of blood. How could they be so heartless? The sight was horrific, and I couldn't help but gasp again. Unfortunately, one of the rogues heard me this time. This wasn't good. My heart pounded so fast, I had to run, or else I'd meet the same fate. I had to run as fast as my legs could carry me. I was slow for a werewolf, so the rogue wolves could catch up with me eventually, so I had to think fast. Found it. I spotted a hotel entrance, my one way of escaping this mess. I dashed inside, praying I could lose the wolves in the crowded lobby. But nah. Sadly, the moon goddess showed no mercy as the lobby was empty. I had to think really fast. That's when I saw it, a large laundry cart big enough for me to hide in. I had no room to think twice. I climbed into the cart and closed the lid over me. I held my breath listening as the wolves entered the lobby, their growls and snarls echoing off the walls. They were definitely searching for me, and if I wanted to stay alive, I had to be quiet. The cart was finally moved and I felt myself being wheeled away from the lobby. I had no idea of where I was going, not that I minded, but as long as it was away from the wolves, I couldn't be happier. The cart came to a stop, and I heard the opening of the door. I was taken into the room, and whoever took me in left. So I was alone, and at that moment, I felt safe. I climbed out of the laundry cart, relieved, and then noticed the room. Whoever stayed here was wealthy. But my relief was short-lived as I was immediately confronted with a sight that made my heart skip a beat. A handsome, tall man emerged from the shower, his body glistening with water droplets. O.M.G. I couldn't help but stare at his broad shoulders and defined abs. My eyes trailed from his chin to his chest down to his waistline, then I realized. Oh. He was naked. Holy crap. I turned around, my face turned red, burning with embarrassment. I had never seen a man naked before, but I knew what I saw was. I almost passed out just thinking about it. My reaction made the man laugh. I didn't know the hotel gave out special goodies with the laundry, he said with amusement. His voice sounded so deep and sexy. I could literally feel shivers down my spine. My face grew even hotter and I muttered a hasty apology. I'm so sorry. I'll just leave. I stammered, trying to make a quick exit. But as I turned to leave, it was drawn to me that I actually had no idea where I was or how to get back to safety. And the handsome man, still naked, probably had a curious expression on his face. Just as the man was about to say something, a knock at the door interrupted us. Special delivery. A deep voice called out. I froze as I recognized the voice. It belonged to the leader of the rogue wolves. I felt a surge of fear, wondering how he had found me. Luckily, the hot man wrapped a towel around his waist as he moved towards the door. But I was quick to stop him. Please, don't open the door. I whispered to him. They are after me. You're in trouble, he asked. I swallowed hard as I replied. Huge trouble. They're going to kill me. Please. The man's expression turned grim. You messed with a rogue. They won't stop until they find you. I felt a wave of desperation wash over me. Then give me protection. I pleaded, looking up at him. Don't ask me how I knew he could offer protection. From the design of the room and the way he carried himself, I could tell that he was powerful. He exuded an aura of confidence and authority, and I sensed that he might be my only hope for survival. On one condition, he said, his eyes glinting with a hint of amusement. And of course, there's always a condition. Be my sex slave, he said. I was forced to shoot him a glance. A sex slave? His condition rang in my ears, making me feel like I had been punched in the gut. I had never thought about sex or sexual pleasure. Probably because I knew no one would ever be interested in me. I felt a wave of shame wash over me, followed by a sense of desperation. But I had no other options, no other way to escape the rogue wolves who wanted me dead. Special delivery. The voice outside the door called out again, the impatience clear in his tone. The man in front of me raised an eyebrow. Yes or no? He asked, his voice firm. I'll give you all the protection you need. I hesitated, my mind racing with the implications of what I was about to agree to. But I knew I had no choice. I took a deep breath and nodded, the word barely above a whisper. Yes. Good. He said as he slipped on a long coat and headed for the door. Lock the door behind me, he instructed, his eyes glinting with a hint of warning. I smiled and nodded, still trying to process what I had just agreed to. As soon as the door was locked behind him, I mentally scolded myself. Emilia, you are insane. What do you know about sex? Everything went still as the air seemed to fill with some cold, intense electric presence. Was there someone in the room too? And behold, he appeared before me. He was standing right in front of me. One moment, I'm standing alone in the room. The next, this man appears out of nowhere. My soul nearly left my body as I let out a startled yell, my heart racing with fear. How had he moved so quietly? So quickly? I almost screamed, but then I had doubt that would do me any good. I tried taking a step back, and as soon as I did, he whispered, "Don't move." My body seemed to shut down. My legs gave way beneath me, and my vision began to blur. I felt myself falling, and then, everything went black. I was unaware of anything else, my mind consumed by the dark. I was trapped in a void, unable to move or think. As I slowly came to reality, I realized I was in a different room. The opulent furnishings and lavish decorations were unmistakable signs of wealth, but it was the chains that caught my attention. My hands were bound to the wall by thick chains. Something wasn't right here. I tugged at the restraints, but they didn't budge a bit. I immediately noticed my clothes. Someone had changed my clothes. I was dressed in a transparent white nightgown that left nothing to the imagination. The fabric was silky and smooth, but still, I felt naked. I felt a wave of shame and vulnerability wash over me, my face burning with embarrassment. Who had changed me into this? And why? I studied the room, and that was how I found my protector standing by the window with his back to me. He seemed lost in thought, with his shoulders tense and rigid. What's going on? I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. Why am I chained up? He turned to face me, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of intensity and possessiveness. You're mine, Emilia, he said, his voice low and husky. Or did you forget our agreement? Of course, I didn't forget. But why the chains? Are they essential? I asked. Yes, Emilia. You don't know the plans I have stored for you. On your knees, he commanded. I hesitated a bit, but I let my knees sink to the floor. I was kneeling so close to him, my face the same level as his waist. And something in my guts told me I knew what he wanted. I was naive, yes. But it didn't stop me from reading books or thinking about them. You're here as my slave, Emilia, he stated grumpily. And you should know you'll always be under my control. You're here to serve me, to please me, and probably give me an heir. And so you'll do until your very last breath. The day you betray me, or disobey me, that's the day you stop breathing. Whoa. Give him an heir? We never agreed to that. Fear sizzled through my body as he said those words to me. After that, he unhooked his belt and pulled down his pants, making the long rod bounce out of its position. I had to gasp and flinch when I saw the sight. Goodness. It was so big and terrifying. Was that really going to go inside of my mouth? You should know what to do, he said. I don't. I haven't done it before. I confessed. You're a librarian. Surely you must have read about it. How did he know so much about me? Yet I didn't even know his name. Taking a heavy gulp, I wrapped my hand around it and began stroking it gently. Slowly, I lowered my lips and took it into my mouth, forcing myself to cover the width completely. I took it in, pulled out to the phallus, and took it in again. I repeated the process, and so it went until he grabbed me by the hair and pushed me closer to his thighs so I get stuck to it. The long member had to hit the back of my throat, and as he held me there to his thighs, it made me unable to breathe. I felt like I was about to die. I mumbled and tried pulling my head away from his thighs, but it was clearly impossible as his hold on me was quite strong. I struggled. And just when I was about to lose it, he thankfully pulled me away, and I ended up coughing profusely. Not bad for a starter, he said. Was that supposed to be a compliment? I lay there exhausted from pleasuring him. I couldn't help but feel a pang of hunger. I'm starving, I said, my voice barely a whisper. His gaze snapped to mine. You think you deserve food? He spat out. You think you have earned the right to eat? For some reason, his attitude changed and I shrank back, intimidated by his fury. No, I shuddered. His expression twisted into a cruel smile. Good. Because you're not getting any. You'll eat when I say you can and not a moment sooner. What's your name? I asked, feeling extremely weak. Elijah. He coldly replied and left the room. I stood in front of the mirror lost in thoughts. 3 days had passed since I last saw Elijah, since the last time I had pleasured him. I couldn't help but wonder what he was doing. Had he forgotten about it? My mind wandered back to the night he had taken my virginity. It had been a painful and pleasurable experience that left me vulnerable. Despite how rough he handled me, he had fulfilled his promise. He protected me and kept me safe from harm by keeping me trapped within my room in the mansion. I was trapped here at the mercy of a man who seemed to have some sort of delight in controlling me. The crazy thing was that I felt drawn, like a mate kind of thing. Miss, time for your bath, Sophia said as he held me into the tub. It was a routine I had grown accustomed to. I have some good news, she whispered. Sir Elijah has given you permission to leave the room to get some fresh air. You get to see the gardens and the rest. I couldn't believe it. He was letting me out of the room? Let's get me dressed up quickly then. I felt a mix of emotions. Excitement, curiosity, and relief. I was dressed up in a short, beautiful floral gown which Sophia complimented. You look lovely, miss. Shall we? I nodded, excited to explore the walls of the huge mansion. She escorted me to the gardens where we talked among the blooming flowers. She was an omega like me too, but she was a servant. She chatted me about the mansion's history while I listened intently. After a while, she apologized and said she had an errand to run. I'll be back soon, miss. Please wait for me here, she said, hurrying off. But me being me, I continued walking on my own, taking sights of the mansion. As I turned to a corner, I noticed a dark passageway that seemed out of this place among the modern decor. I decided to investigate. At the far end, I saw a wooden door that looked ancient. I approached it quietly and my hand reaching out to grasp the rusty doorknob. I turned the knob slowly and slipped inside, finding myself in a strange room. The walls were adorned with cobweb and the air was thick with dust. As I looked around, I heard a faint voice. It was Elijah's voice. He was speaking in hushed tones, but I couldn't quite make out what he was saying, and he wasn't alone. How much longer can you bear the pain of the curse? His beater asked with concern. Elijah's response was low. I have slept with the chosen ones, but none have been able to bear the child. The moon goddess seems determined to see me suffer. I felt shiver running down my spine as I listened to their conversation. Elijah was cursed? The beater's voice was filled with empathy. Perhaps it's time to reconsider. Elijah cut him off. Leave me, he commanded. The beater nodded and quickly vanished, leaving Elijah alone in the room. I held my breath, wondering if I had been discovered, but Elijah's next words sent a shiver down my spine. I know you're here. Come out, Emilia. How did he know I was there? As I stepped out of the shadows with my heart racing, I got a full view of Elijah. He was on his knees, his body slumped forward and his eyes sunken. He looked weak and vulnerable, a fat cry from the powerful figure who had taken me on the bed. Are you sick? I asked, but he laughed. While he laughed, I noticed blood seeping from his lips, dripping down his chin and staining his white shirt. My inner wolf, who had been silent for so long, suddenly spoke up. Mate, she growled, her voice loud and clear in my mind. I was taken aback. This was the first time my wolf had ever spoken to me. What did she mean? Why was she calling Elijah my mate? I ignored my wolf's words and ran to Elijah, touching his face. What's the curse? I asked, my voice filled with concern. Elijah's eyes fluttered open, and he looked up at me. It's nothing, he whispered, his voice weak. He looked around the room, realizing that Sophia was nowhere to be found. Where's Sophia? Elijah asked. He coughed, wincing in pain. I'll have her head for failing to follow instructions. He growled. I felt a surge of fear for Sophia. No, please. I begged. I came here of my own free will. Don't punish her. Elijah's gaze locked onto mine, his eyes cold and hard. Leave, he ordered. But I refused to move. I couldn't just leave him like this. Elijah's voice rose. Beat her. Take her to her room and lock the door. And summon Sophia for her punishment. I felt a hand on my arm, pulling me away from Elijah. I struggled against the beater's grip, but he was too strong. He dragged me out of the room, leaving Elijah, my mate, alone and suffering, with Sophia in trouble. I paced back and forth in my room, my mind racing with thoughts of what had just happened. Elijah's condition, the curse, and my inner wolf's sudden appearance all swirled together in a jumbled mess. My inner wolf spoke up again, her voice urgent. Elijah is going to kill someone. I felt a chill run down my spine. Who was he going to kill? And then I remembered Sophia. She was the one who had been tasked with watching me, and Elijah had threatened to punish her. I rushed to the door, but it was locked. I was trapped. Without hesitation, I ran to the window and threw it open. The cool night air rushed in, and I took a deep breath before climbing out onto the ledge. I looked down, my stomach dropping at the sight of the ground far below. But I knew I had to act fast. Sophia's life depended on it. I descended the wall, my hands and feet searching for holds in the dark. My heart pounded in my chest, but I pushed on, driven by the need to save Sophia. As I reached the ground, I took off in a sprint, racing towards the mansion's inner courtyard. I could hear the sound of footsteps and murmured voices, growing louder with each step. I burst into the courtyard, just as Elijah's beater was about to deliver the final blow to Sophia. I didn't know what to do. I immediately tackled the beater, sending him crashing to the ground. Elijah appeared, his eyes blazing with fury. But as he looked at me, something flickered in his gaze. Recognition? Admiration? You shouldn't have interfered. He growled, his voice low and menacing. But I stood my ground, my inner wolf rising to the surface. You won't hurt her. I snarled, baring my teeth. I was pretty sure he knew I was his mate. Elijah's eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. Then, his gaze flicked to his beater, and he growled, "Release Sophia." The beater hesitated for a moment before nodding and stepping back from Sophia. Elijah's eyes snapped back to mine, and he ordered, "You, follow me." I didn't want to leave Sophia's side, but the look on Elijah's face was an angry one. I knew better than to disobey him. With a hesitant glance at Sophia, I turned and followed Elijah, leaving Sophia and the maids in the courtyard behind. As we walked, Elijah's silence was oppressive, and I couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead. I had disobeyed him. He had warned me severally about it, and now I was in trouble. But did he feel I was his mate? My head was running with different excuses I could give him for disobeying him. As we reached the room, before I could even think about explaining myself, Elijah's hands were on me, roughly pinning me to the bed. His eyes blazed with a fierce intensity, and his breath was hot against my skin. I struggled against his grip, but he held me firm, his fingers digging into my wrists. "You shouldn't have disobeyed me," he growled, his voice low and menacing. I tried to speak, to explain why I had to disturb the punishment, but Elijah's lips crashed down on mine, silencing me. His kiss was brutal and demanding, and I felt myself getting lost in its intensity. Elijah's rough hands and demanding lips sparked a fire within me, and I found myself surrendering to his passion. And we pleasured ourselves till the end. As we lay there, Elijah's chest heaving against mine, I suddenly felt a wave of nausea wash over me. My stomach churned, and I felt like I was going to be sick. Despite my growing discomfort, I managed to gasp out a question. "Elijah, do you know that we're mates?" Elijah's eyes snapped to mine, his gaze piercing. For a moment, he just stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then, his face twisted into a scowl, and he growled, "What are you talking about?" I took a deep breath, trying to explain despite my growing nausea. "My inner wolf, she's been dormant, but when I saw you, she woke up. She's been telling me that you're my mate." Elijah's scowl deepened, and he sat up, his eyes never leaving mine. "So an Omega can feel the bond?" "Well, I felt the bond," he admitted, his voice low. "But it won't matter. The mate bond will fail, just like it has with all the others." I felt a pang of confusion. "What do you mean?" Elijah's gaze seemed to bore into my soul. "If there's no pulp to begin with, the bond can't form properly. And even if it does, it will eventually wither and die." I shook my head, trying to understand. "What do you mean by pulp?" Elijah's expression twisted into a bitter smile. "And you claim to be a librarian?" "A child, Emilia. The bond needs a child to be born from our union to be strong. But I'm cursed, and my seed is tainted." I felt a surge of shock and realization. Elijah was saying that our bond, our mate connection, relied on us having a child together. So that was the curse, and Elijah believed his curse made that impossible. "Why were you cursed?" I asked. Elijah's eyes seemed to glaze over, lost in thought. "I was cursed after I mistakenly killed my sister's mate," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt a jolt of shock. "Your sister's mate?" I repeated. Elijah nodded, his expression twisted in pain. "Yes. I was young and foolish, blinded by my desire for power. I thought he was a threat to our pack, but it was all a lie. I killed him, and my sister was devastated." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "She cursed me, Emilia. She said that I would never find true love, that my seed would be tainted, and that I would be forever alone." I felt a pang of sorrow for Elijah, for the pain and guilt he had carried with him for so long. Suddenly, the nausea that had been simmering in my stomach boiled over, and I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. I jumped out of bed, rushing to the bathroom as fast as I could. Elijah's concerned voice followed me. "Emilia, are you all right?" I felt super sick. I barely managed to gasp out a reply. I feel sick." And the last thing I remembered was Elijah's worried face, and then everything went black. Moments later, I slowly opened my eyes, groggily taking in my surroundings. I was back in bed, surrounded by Elijah, his beater, and a doctor I didn't recognize. Elijah's worried face was inches from mine, his eyes scanning me intently. "Emilia, are you fine? How are you feeling?" I tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness washed over me, forcing me back onto the pillows. What happened?" I stammered. Elijah's expression softened, and he took my hand in his. "You passed out in the bathroom," he explained. "We got you back to bed and called the doctor." I looked around, still trying to clear the fog from my head. "Why is there a doctor here?" I asked, my eyes narrowing in confusion. Elijah's gaze locked onto mine, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "You're carrying our pulp, Emilia," he said, his voice low and husky. I could tell that he was really happy. My eyes widened in shock as the doctor nodded in confirmation. "Congratulations, you're pregnant," he said with a smile. Tears of joy streamed down my face as I gazed at Elijah, my heart overflowing with happiness. I had found my mate, my protector, and now, I was carrying our child. Elijah's face was etched with concern as he wiped away my tears. "Don't cry, Emilia," he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. But this man was crying too, his eyes shining with happiness. I smiled, feeling my heart swell with love for this complex, brooding man. I love you, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Elijah's face lit up with a radiant smile. I love you too, he replied, his voice filled with conviction. We kissed, our lips meeting in a tender, passionate embrace. As we held each other, I felt the moon goddess's blessing wash over us, filling our hearts with joy and our future with promise. It seemed that the moon goddess had indeed been merciful, bringing us together despite the odds. And as we basked in the happiness of our newfound love, I knew that our future would be bright, filled with love, laughter, and adventure.
The end. Did you enjoy the story? Kindly leave your review in the comments and subscribe for more interesting stories. Lots of love.